Well, the stock market closed at a new record high today. Yet another stock market high during the Biden presidency, which has been full of stock market highs. The stock market is apparently happy in the afterglow of Kamala Harris's Democratic convention and her rising in the polls, indicating that Donald Trump will not be allowed to ruin the economy with the stupidest tariff proposals in history. Because instead of being President Trump next year, the stock market seems to believe he will just be defendant Trump next year. Donald Trump spent the day ranting on social media about a new superseding indictment voted on by a new grand jury in Washington, D.C. The new indictment in the case of United States of America versus Donald J. Trump, defendant, replaces a previous indictment with the same title and the same list of 4 crimes: conspiracy to defraud the United States, conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding, obstruction of an attempt to obstruct an official proceeding, and conspiracy against rights. The superseding indictment is, in effect, Jack Smith's edited version of the original indictment, with the editing version incorporating, in Jack Smith's view, the Supreme Court's new invention of presidential immunity for official acts by a president. This indictment is in response to that. While Donald Trump spent the day worried about Jack Smith's and other prosecutors' ability to close in on him after he loses the presidential election, the Harris for President campaign released this ad.
For most of my childhood, we were renters. My mother saved for well over a decade to buy a home. I was a teenager when that day finally came, and I can remember so well how excited she was. I know what home ownership means, and sadly right now it is out of reach for far too many American families. During the foreclosure crisis, I took on the big banks who exploited people in the housing market. And today, corporate landlords buy hundreds of houses and apartments, then turn them around and rent them out at extremely high prices. I will fight for a law that cracks down on these practices. We will end America's housing shortage by building 3 million new homes and rentals. We should be doing everything we can to make it more affordable to buy a home, not less. I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message.
We were renters, too, in my preschool years. For all of Donald Trump's childhood, his father was a racist landlord who refused to rent apartments to people like Kamala Harris and her parents. Donald Trump, the most racist presidential nominee of a party who did not personally own slaves, grew up to join his father's racist business, which led them both to be charged by the Justice Department in 1973 with violating the civil rights of applicants for apartments by viciously discriminating against black people. The new superseding indictment issued by a grand jury today covers familiar ground for regular viewers of this program and for readers of our first guest's indispensable book, The Trump Indictments, which now has to be updated. The new indictment is 36 pages long, replacing the previous indictment, which was 45 pages long. Gone from the new indictment is the dramatic scene that will be in all of the movies about Donald Trump's crimes, because the Supreme Court decided to allow Donald Trump to commit crimes he committed in the Oval Office on New Year's Eve, when the entire command structure of the Justice Department threatened to quit, sitting there right in front of Donald Trump. When if Donald Trump went through with his plan to make an obscure Justice Department official named Jeffrey Clark the new acting attorney general to help carry out crimes with Donald Trump. That scene will be in the movie, but not in the Trump indictment anymore. The Supreme Court ruled that any crime Donald Trump conspires to commit in the Oval Office with appointed members of the executive branch, any of those crimes are crimes that the Supreme Court believes the founders wanted the president to get away with. The Republican Supreme Court is, of course, insanely wrong about that. Here's what Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson said to Norah O'Donnell about that tonight.
In your dissent, you wrote that the court declared for the first time in history that the most powerful official in the United States can, under circumstances yet to be fully determined, become a law unto himself. It sounds like a warning.
I mean, that was my view of what the court determined.
You were concerned about broad immunity.
I was concerned about a system that appeared to provide immunity for one individual under one set of circumstances, when we have a criminal justice system that had ordinarily treated everyone the same.
That decision was not a product of legal scholarship. That decision was a product of Republican convenience. Every justice who voted in support of that opinion is a Republican. Only one of those Republican justices was appointed by a president who entered the presidency by winning the most votes. George H.W. Bush is the last Republican president who entered the presidency by winning the most votes. That was in 1988. And he gave us Clarence Thomas. If you lived in a democracy where the candidate with the most votes wins, there would be no other Republican justice currently serving on the Supreme Court. Clarence Thomas would be the only one. The current composition of the Supreme Court stands, in my view, and in my view alone, as a stain on America's claim to the world that it is a democracy. In no other democracy in the 21st century would 7 out of the 50 states decide presidential elections through an electoral contrivance created in a slaveholding country 235 years ago, a contrivance they tried to make sound serious by calling it a college, the Electoral College. The Electoral College gave us this Supreme Court, not the voters. And the Supreme Court has given Donald Trump his immunity, which in Jack Smith's interpretation of that immunity decision still allows Donald Trump to be charged with all the crimes he committed while president that were not committed in his official capacity as president of the United States. And so the indictment stresses that Donald Trump and his co-conspirators, quote, were acting in a private capacity. In the new indictment, all of Trump's co-conspirators are people who were not government officials, Rudolph Giuliani being co-conspirator number 1. The other co-conspirators were all private lawyers turning Donald Trump's lies about the election into crimes. The other co-conspirators are John Eastman, Sidney Powell, Kenneth Chesebro, and according to the New York Times, likely Boris Epstein. On page 12 of the indictment, an unnamed senior campaign advisor, who is not a co-conspirator, is quoted by Jack Smith describing everything Donald Trump and his co-conspirators were publicly saying at the time as, quote, all conspiracy shit beamed down from the mothership.